today I met with the Diversity Council on the relaunch of their council. It was very exciting, and what I was discussing with them was the importance of understanding the connection between diversity, unconscious bias and inclusion. I believe that inclusion and unconscious bias are inextricably connected, and that actually what we have to understand is that we can't just say we're going to be inclusive leaders. We can't just say we're going to have an inclusive environment. We have to do the work that it takes to understand, number one, what I'm doing personally that causes me to exclude others, and number two, what might be my blind spots or my unconscious biases that may be contributing in some way to me not being inclusive. So the message with the Diversity Council and with all groups that I work with is really start with yourself first. Look at yourself, ask yourself, am I being inclusive, or because well-intentioned people tend to not realize that there are myriads of ways in any given day that we can exclude others and make them feel that they're not wanted or not fully present in the organization. Well, I think the business case for diversity and inclusion has been there for some time, and it's primarily about managing the talent pipeline and making sure that not only do you bring good people into the organization, but you keep good people in the organization. It costs a lot of money to invest in the training of employees, and you certainly don't want to be doing that and then having them leave the company. So the talent pipeline is critical, but I always tell my clients that there's a difference between diversity and inclusion, because you can hire diverse people, but to actually create an inclusive environment is where the challenge is. So when you look around the organization, it's really easy to say to yourself, we've got diversity, look at the floor, look at how many women, look at how many ethnic minorities, but are you actually having a conversation with them to see whether they feel included or whether they're having to do something to hold their own energy back? So I think the business case, which is always hard to prove because what companies have to do is measure the demographics, the business case needs to widen in order to look at how inclusive is the environment. Because it's one thing to be sure you've got diverse people, it's another thing to look at where these diverse people are placed in the organization, but really how do you measure the inclusiveness of the environment? I think there's no question that the elements that contribute to doing diversity and inclusion work well are primarily engaging the hearts and minds of the leaders. If you don't have the leadership on board, then other people will not follow. It's really quite simple. People do what's inspected and not what's expected, and so we tend to look at the top of the organization and ask ourselves, how serious are my leaders about diversity and inclusion? And if they're serious, then I'm going to follow their lead. But I think it's also important to understand with the issue of inclusion that we have to manage the horizontal axis, which is looking up the organization at the leadership, as well as the vertical axis. So in other words, we have to look at what needs to happen for those of us who are women or ethnic minorities, people who are gay and lesbian, etc. What needs to happen for them so that we can all do our part to manage an inclusive environment, because it can't just be about the leadership, even although in every client system I've ever worked in where success has been the case, we've always had the leadership's engagement in a very full way, and the CEO or the chairman of the board totally committed to having a diverse and inclusive workforce.